Now, this will make you laugh. Gareth, for the first time in a while, me and my husband went out and we left the central heating on for the kids and my parents who were babysitting. They didn't know how to turn off the central heating. So when we got back, the children were sat there on the sofa eating lollipops. That's brilliant. You must have a photograph of that, surely, or a video. You must have something there, because that's one of those scenes that, I mean, it's incredible to hear about it, but it will be incredible if you've got a photograph of something like, and the headlines that you could use that for. In fact, we could do a whole show on that, I'm sure. Now, I wasn't here last week, but apparently Richard and Fraser, they did a rather good job. Good morning, Richard.
Good morning, Gareth. How are you?
I'm not so bad. How was it?
It was excellent, actually. In fact, we were, I mean, don't tell him I told you. He's thinking of doing his new spin-off show, Richard and Fraser, in terms of HR and life, doing events and, media and stuff like that.
Like a house on fire.
Absolutely.
What were you actually talking about last week? Or did he go off on a complete tangent like he did with Dr. Ken on Thursday?
Well, it was...
Oh, here we go.
There were enough tangents within the concept for it to keep within the framework, Gareth. I don't want to offend Fraser on air, so no.
Oh, go for it. I mean, I normally do.
No, it's very good. We talked about, in fact, Fraser realised there are a few things that he needs to look at after the show, which I'll be talking to him about probably at another time, about the competencies and structure and things like that. So
he treats his staff so badly, Fraser, honestly. I mean, he doesn't give them a break. He doesn't pay them, well, hardly anything at all. Slave labor is a phrase that I think is often bandied around his office. So we're talking about GDPR. And yes. I wanted to tell us, when did this first come in? Because when I worked at the other place, I remember it coming into force and we were all told what it was, and we were told that we weren't allowed to have listeners' details on pieces of paper on our desks. When did it actually come into force?
You'll be surprised. It's not that long ago. It's the Data Protection Act that's linked to this. It's 2018, and with GDPR, and there was loads. You're right. There were loads of scare stories, weren't there? Your company's going to be fined millions of pounds if you don't have all these policies in place. And there were actually a number of companies, I remember, coming to us saying, for your clients, do they want a GDPR consultant? That was like a full-time thing. Let's come into their company and be their consultant. Although, not to underestimate it, there is quite a bit to it, and it is an important subject, especially due to the fines that you can have.
So what was before that? Because there's always been data protection, but why does there seem to be so much focus now on this new system called GDPR?
What happened before that is there were different laws across Europe, because we were still in Europe then, of course. And there was this drive to pull everything together, and an assumption that data wasn't protected enough from leaking, from people knowing things about people where they shouldn't. And I think it's probably led or driven by the .coms, in terms of what information is online. It's all global, what people share, what companies know about you.
So what you're trying to say is that basically when we were in the European Union, things weren't very secure, but now they are, Richard. Is that what you're trying to say to me?
I am not saying that at all, Karen. In fact, the European Union brought it in, but it'd be interesting to see in the future where all this goes, won't it? Because as those laws update and change, what will happen here?
And what does it stand for?
It stands for the General Data Protection Regulation.
Oh, I thought I got him on that one there. And this is obviously, it's very important, not only because we should be protecting people's personal data, but you mentioned a little bit about fines, didn't you? Is this still the case? Because, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong on this. I probably am wrong, I'll be honest. But when I worked at the other place, they said that one leak of data, you would get one fine. So potentially, if there was lots of them, it could cost the organisation hundreds of thousands of pounds, maybe even millions of pounds.
I don't think it's like on that sort of scale in terms of, buy one, get one free, or, buy 10 and get, yes, it's not like that sort of thing. There's the maximum fine is just under 17.5 million, or 4% of your global annual turnover. And there have been some people fined. It's sort of taken a while. Amazon were fined in July 21. I put it in euros, unfortunately, because I haven't got pounds, but it's 746 million euros for breaches. Google 50 million, H&M 35 million, British Airways 22 million, Marriott Hotel 20 million.
Well, the thing is about this, where is it fair if it's an accident? Okay, so I mean, I've got friends who work in IT, and they say that there is no systems at all which are 100% guaranteed that there'll be no hacks, there'll be nothing happening. I mean, a lot of these companies, they do spend millions of pounds protecting our data, which is great. They should be doing that. But the thing is that you've always got to keep one step ahead of the hackers. So if it is a genuine accident, surely there's some way around that where the organization can say, actually, we've got all these things in place, but this was an extreme case of a hacker broke into our systems.
I think that there's, to get them fines, there's a lot of investigation. I mean, the Amazon one was it wanted to force users to agree to cookies, and you couldn't opt out. So there's some technical points there. It wasn't a hack. It was them saying, I want to catch this data. But one thing that is relevant here is Morrison's. I don't know if you remember, a couple of years ago, an employee of Morrison's leaked the payroll of 100,000 members of staff into the press and online.
Was that a sort of an angry employee who did that?
Basically that. And in 2015, they were found guilty.
So again, though, the problem here is that what can Morrison's do about that? Because presumably there has to be some people in their organization who have got access to those details. And if an individual decides to go off on a tangent and start doing that, I mean, Morrison's can't erase a person's brain. They can't know that a person's going to do that. So it's a tricky situation, isn't it?
It is. And on that case, the UK Supreme Court said the retailer wasn't to blame for the actions of the employee. So they weren't fined by that. On that basis, that they said that it's one person went and did it. Now, if he'd been doing it in the day-to-day use of his work, if he'd have used that data for things like that, that would have been different, because that would have been the employer and an employee using data where they shouldn't be within the context of an employer. But because he did it against the employer and he took it and stole it, then the employer wasn't relevant. Now, I'm sure there's loads of other things underneath that. How secure was the data? What systems were in place? What access levels there were, where they're probably quite strong. But there are quite an interesting few things. I've got 9 today that an employer needs to consider, and reading them through again, I'm thinking, okay, there's a few things in there that employers need to keep up to date with. You know, like you get the big bang of something and everyone's very conscious of it, and now it's sort of slipped away and this COVID's come in. Is that relevant anymore? And what's happened really is that there's a few areas where GDPR is becoming even more important, because people are working from home. They've got company data. They may have using their own devices or a company device, and they have family round, they have friends round, they can see their computers, they might have paperwork on the side of the table. And all of a sudden, all these secure environments where you have these large security people at a door, these swipe passes and everything to get into where that data is, it's now spread out in people's houses. So that's increased the risk a lot during COVID.
So give us this list then, Richard, that you've got.
Okay. Number 1, you need to appoint a data protection officer to include all aspects of information, including DPA, freedom of information, service access requests where people can get data.
And is this any size organization? Because if you're a small charity shop or an organization like Connect Radio is, we couldn't afford to employ one person to sort out that.
It is proportionate. And but you want somebody who's looking after data. Like health and safety, you know, with a small organization, you don't have to have a full-time health and safety officer standing there looking around, is everything safe? But you have to be aware of it. And the legal obligations don't go away because you don't have a health and safety officer if somebody hurt themselves badly because you put I don't know, a big lead across the room that everyone have to hop over to go to the desk or whatever. So, there are proportionality elements to this, but you wouldn't need DPA. But, get to 10, 15 employees, the responsibility starts to increase as you get bigger. And another one that probably any employer, audit information systems to find out who holds what data and why. Now, we don't normally do that. We give data away sometimes quite freely. Oh, yeah, here it is. Give him a call on this number. And then consider how it's used. And when you're getting a bit bigger, issue guidelines for managers on how to manage data, because people don't talk about it. It's sort of like, well, there's the system. Go and get their address off of there. You need to ensure the information collected complies with the DPA and GDPR, and checking the security of it as well. Can anyone go to a drawer and get information out? And then you've got international transfers as number 6. You've got checking the use of automated decision-making. When if they live there, we'll do this. Number 8, reviewing the policies and practice, like for references, private use of telephones, email and post, and then monitoring the data on a sort of continuing basis is the 9th point. And when you read through those, if you've got data on just 1 or 2 employees, and people, you're thinking, okay, is it secure? And information, especially on non-company IT or telephones, is that secure? Has it got sensitive data on there that people need to know about? Because all employees need to be informed of their purpose and use of their personal data, and they must freely consent to it being used as well.
It's all very complicated, and I can't imagine that they had systems like this in place about 50, 60 years ago.
I probably guess it wasn't around then, even in an early stage.
I imagine all the supporters' details on a big whiteboard, and they were going, so Jimmy gives us £6 a month, and then they tick him off when he's paid. It's funny, isn't it? But as we go through this digital age, and there's so much information out there, it is important that it's safe. And remember, if you've got any questions for Richard, maybe you run an organization or you're struggling with GDPR, you can earn a fortune on the black market selling data. So Richard says, if you go to the website, which is trustedhr.co.uk, that's trustedhr.co.uk, and a free 40-minute consultation for all who say the word Connect Radio. You see, there is power in that Connect Radio word. What are we talking about next week, Richard?
Talking about leadership in the workplace.
Leadership in the workplace. So maybe you're a leader or you've recently taken over as a manager. How do you do good leadership in the workplace?